Good morning, everyone. I am just getting set up here and I will get started in a minute. I know I'm a minute or two early, so I'm not gonna rush. Give everybody a chance to join. Let's see here. I'm gonna see what I can do to get the best lighting. There we go. All right. So, I hope everyone is having a great Saturday and that you have some fun plans for today. I am doing my live. I have some art to do. And then I am teaching a really fun class later this afternoon that I have been looking forward to. And then tonight I'm actually working on developing another class. So, fun. Busy day, but all good things. So, let's see. We're just going to give it a minute for a couple more people to join, and we're going to get started. Drupe is... Hi, Janet! Drupe is one of those patterns. To be perfectly honest, it is not one of my favorites to draw traditionally because I struggle with it. Not with the actual pattern itself, but because I so very much like to think outside the box and to come up with tangulations and things like that. And it seems like every time I draw it, it's the same, right? And so this was a little bit of a challenge for me to push myself out of my comfort zone and to really come up with some different options for you. Hi, Susan. Good morning. So I'm going to show you the first couple, and then I'll show you some of the other ones that I've done, and I've picked a couple of these. I did a whole bunch. But I picked a couple of these to show you how to draw them. But like I did last week, I also kind of want to put them out there for you and see which ones you'd like me to use to demo. Obviously, I'll demo the original pattern so that everyone knows how to draw it in the, traditional way. But then I kind of like your feedback on which ones you'd like me to show you my takes on them. So, this is the basic droop pattern, right? So this is the one. When I'm on screen, it's kind of funny. I always point at my computer and I point on things that aren't under the camera sometimes. So I'm working on that. But this is our basic pattern, the way that most people learn how to draw it. It's a pretty pattern, and it's one that fills up a lot of space if you want it to, or can be drawn tiny. And it's got some neat elements, places you can vary things, which will change up the way that it looks. But like I said, it's not one that I've used a lot to create my own variations. So this is the standard or traditional way of drawing it. Hi Tony, good morning. This is droop drawn in a grid, which I kind of like. It's fun. You could use it for, without doing the centerpiece as a border. You could, use it just along the top or the bottom of something, depending on how big or how small you want to draw this one. And with this, I used a bolder stroke for these little lines in between, and it created like this little flower pattern. And I tried to match them up somewhat, but I didn't overly stress about it. But it gives it, kind of this neat grid pattern over the top of it, which is kind of nice. I drew another one where I didn't pay quite as much attention to lining them up, and I actually drew the grids in here in pen, and I actually really liked what I got there too. So it's kind of fun to play with that in a grid form. Alright, so I'll set those off to the side as well. This one, I like this one a lot. This I didn't add a border to, which is something I don't do very often. If you look really closely, you can see I started to, and then I decided that my border was really just a suggestion, and was a suggestion I chose to ignore. So what I did here is, for those initial strokes, I made wide ribbons that kind of flared out at the end, and then I made a bold little, these little crescents, these little curves. This would be a fun one to use to put other patterns inside of even. So before I move on to any of the other tangulations, I'm going to demonstrate how to draw Drupe. Okay. For those of you that don't know, I always like to point out that I have recently discovered a real love of mechanical pencils to replace just a regular pencil, although I do still have, like, I have my Zentangle pencil here and I use it a lot. But I really like the little teeny tiny points and the way that I can get in for shading with a mechanical pencil. Susan, unfortunately, sometimes the camera autofocuses in and out. I'm working on trying to get it more calibrated. Let me try and bring it in a little bit, but it looks clear on my end. I don't know about anyone else's. Let's see. So let me know if it goes blurry again, okay? So I am going to, so I've drawn my border with my mechanical pencil. Oh, I was saying about mechanical pencils. I recently discovered a really cool art supply company called Mozart Supplies when I was ordering new mechanical pencils, and they're really inexpensive, and I got this whole set. Look at me enabling you. I get nothing for sharing the tools and stuff that I use, but I like these a lot. This was $10, and I got 4 mechanical pencils in different sizes and 4 packs of 30 leads. So, and I like these a lot. So just something to throw out there. If you are a mechanical pencil user, these are a nice starter set. So just something that you might be interested in. Anyway, so I'm going to come in now, and I've drawn my border. I'm going to start with a curved line. And you could make this a straight line and you'll get a different look, but I always like it with the curved line. It's how I learned to draw it. And usually once I've learned to draw it a certain way, I kind of get not locked into it, but it becomes my go-to. Tony, you asked about mechanical pencils. I usually use an 02 or an 05. This pack of mechanical pencils that I just got comes in an 03, an 05, an 07, and an 09. So I have all different size leads, which is nice. Okay, so I added that line. I'm going to kind of think of like a clock face, and I'm going to work my way around, making some more curvy, crisscrossy strokes. And you can make as many as you'd like. Usually when I do this middle one is where I decide if I want to continue going in the same curve or if I want to change up my curve. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You can do this with 6, you can do it with, 4. It's again, this is how I learned to draw it. So I have these strokes in here. My next step is I'm going to create an aura on each of these spokes. So like a V-shaped aura, like a little pie wedge, or if you played Trivial Pursuit, like those little Trivial Pursuit pie pieces. And I'm going to do that in each of these segments. Okay, just checking to see if I've gone blurry again. I everything looks clear on my end. But if it isn't, just please shout out so I can adjust. Alright, now, and this is one of these areas where using a thicker or thinner line or pen will give you a different look. So this is a great place for variation. You could also add multiple of these little auras for a different look. I like to try and keep them relatively uniform on each of my spokes. Now I'm going to come in and I'm going to add some curves. Okay. I like to try and line them up, but you don't have to. Maybe that one peeks out off of my border. I really like to draw this one pretty big. I'm on a new, I don't want to say new kick, but a new process where I'm trying to draw tangles bigger than I often do. I tend to work really small, and I'm trying to force myself a little bit out of that to, to add some variety to my tangling. So I'm just repeating this all the way around. Okay, and then I will add a second line. And you can make one of these bolder or add like a hoop to it. I like to add some emphasis on one of these lines. So I'm adding a little bit of line weighting. And I'm not going to do this on all of them because I have so many things I want to show you. But I will do it on this innermost little hoop or curve, right? It's a great way as you go. Maybe these were in a slightly different spot, so instead of doing an aura on the outside, I'm doing one on the inside, just so that they're kind of all about the same size. Okay. Like I said, I'm adding some rounding, which means that I'm adding thickness in one spot but not necessarily in the other. And I could add that rounding to all of these as I go, or I can just do it on some. And you can see on this one that I added that rounding to one stroke all the way around. So I'm adding in these auras. I'm not going to add that rounding this time. I may go back and do it later. But for right now, I think you get the idea. Hi, Pat. And now I'm going to come in with my pen and I'm going to add some lines, and you can make them little dashes, you can make them diagonal, you can make them go the full length of these, or you can just make them like little hash marks. I like them to be connected down in these bottom ones, but I don't always do it that way. And this just adds a little bit of detail work. Okay, and then continue in the next row, however many you think that it needs. And these might be different sizes, so you may need different numbers of strokes for each size. Like this one, I hit 5, or I was able to fit 5 in here, but this one is going to be more like probably 8. Okay, and I'm going to continue that all the way up into this last row. And if I really wanted to, I could keep going and make it look like there's another row up there, but I like it like this. And a lot of this is going to be, you know, how it feels right for you intuitively and what you want to do with this pattern. But again, you know, we learn a certain way to draw it, and that becomes our go-to until, you know, we find something else we like a little better. Hi, Barb. I hope everybody's doing good this morning. I was up way too late, so I am going to be drinking tea all day long. All right, so there you go. This one, as you can see, looks a little different than this one. They, you know, changing just little things like the way that I connected these in the center, the way I didn't do the rounding on these, just adds a little bit of variety. But I never see that as enough to consider it like a tangulation. You can shade this along these ribbons. You could shade it along these, like these stacked rows. I usually do both. But again, changing where and how you shade is going to give you a different look as well. So I'm going to add some nice dramatic shading to this one. So all I did was lay down my graphite, and now I'm softening it with my tortillon. So I've added my shading on those two ribbons. I would work all the way around, and then maybe I would add some shading here and here. And it would kind of pop. Make sense? All right, so now that I've shown you the basic droop pattern, I'm going to show you some more of my variations, because that's really where the fun is in, you know, you learn the pattern and then you think of fun things to do with it. So here is also droop, but it is only a segment or a fragment of it. So you can see I drew my lines, and then I did my aura, and then I did my curves, and I added some little embellishments in there. So that's something fun that you can do. Then I did this one. So this basically has my lines. This is a little bit of a variation. So this has my crisscrossy spider web of lines. I didn't aura these, but I filled this with a different pattern, and then instead of doing line work in my curves, I did some striping with some highlights, which gives a really bold kind of big pop, which is a fun way to play with this pattern. This one, I always think of this, I call this my amoeba tile. So this one I did very similar to the basic pattern in that I made my crisscrosses. I only did 6 this time, so I did 3 crisscross lines, and then I made those lines nice and bold. And then instead of making my curves all go in the same direction and all line up, I kind of made them a little wonky, and it creates this neat flow, right? So it's not quite as structured, it's not quite as precise, but I think that it has a lot of movement and a little bit of whimsy to it, which is, you know, kind of my thing. And then instead of doing straight lines, I added like a variant of mist in it, which I think is, you know, a fun way to play with this. It gives you a really different look, but really you haven't changed things a whole lot, right? So it's a fun way to do it. It's a little bit of fun variety. This would be fun to do with some color. This one may not be instantly recognizable as droop, and that is because instead of using straight lines, I used flux. So instead of using my straight lines, I used another pattern to divide up into my crisscross. And then I made my strokes, my curved strokes, going around inside of it. So it's as you can see, you can do a pattern within a pattern. And then this is my abstract, super funky one that is probably my favorite. Again, I went with the 3 ribbons for crisscross of 6, and I did them in a, I call this my broomstick method, where I kind of flare out at the bottom with little sketchy strokes. And I did that for my ribbons, and then I started to make my curves, and my curves weren't lining up, and I thought, well, what if they were little X's? What if they were going in various different ways? And then I just filled those in with little stripes and, you know, some little line work, and then I added some little hash marks. So those are the variations that I have for you. I would be more than happy to demo a couple of these for you. I'm going to put them out kind of in a little bit of a row here and see which ones you would like to see me draw. But I'm gonna need feedback. So, and I know there's a little bit of a time delay here. I think there's like a 30-second delay from when I do things to when you can see it. So I will give it a second here, and then I would love it if you would post in the comments which ones you would like me to do. They are all fun, aren't they? So if nobody has any preferences, I will do the ones that are the least intuitive, that that maybe aren't, you know, that by looking at it you can't necessarily see exactly how I did it. So I will do this one. I will do this one, and I see that let's see. So this one, and this one. How do those sound? And then we can talk about these other ones some more if you want to. Just let me know. Alright, so I'm going to do the flux one first, because this one is probably the fastest for me, because flux is my mac and cheese tangle. You could really use any pattern that you want to as your dividing lines, right? I chose flux because flux is what I draw most. If you wanted to, and I usually don't, but if you wanted to, you could kind of draw in a little version in the center of those crisscross lines so that you can see which direction you want to go in. I usually don't. I usually just do it freehand, but you certainly can. So I start out and I make my flux going in one direction. And then usually I turn it and I go off to the side. And you don't have to do 8 here. You could do 6, you could do 4. But I'm creating these ribbons of flux like I would do my stripes. And the nice part about flux is you can always build more onto it if you want to. So when I get this all, you know, drawn in, if I decide, oh, I want a different piece in a different area, I could go back in and add it. So like right here, it feels like it needs a flux, but that's okay because I still have to go in between. Draw a little one there. There we go. Turn my tile and I'll go off in this direction. So I kind of have this wild, organic flux pattern going on, which is something that I find very peaceful and I love drawing anyway. Like I said, flux is my mac and cheese or my baked potato tangle. There we go. And one more right over here. And then from here, I would go in and I would add my little embellishments, whether they're little dots or stripes or whatever it is that I wanted to do. Okay. I'm going to leave them alone for right now. I'll come back and I'll finish it off later. So I'm going to add in now, I'm going to add my curved lines, right? And I'm going to do one in each. I love doing this with curved lines. You can, when you do droop, you could do straighter lines, you can do inverted curves, but because this looks so wild and organic, having the curved line makes it fit beautifully in there. You could also have aura'd this if you wanted to, which would have given it a neat look. Okay, so you know how we do that, this aura of this line, you could do that but with your flux. Okay, so I added that curved line in there. I'm gonna aura or halo that stroke. Work my way all the way around, just turning my tile, paying attention to trying to keep it, you know, about the same distance apart, but not making myself crazy over it. And I am, as I do this, I am kind of, you know, trying to decide what I want my feel for this tile to be. Whether I want it to be playful or whether I want it to look super organic, whatever I want to do with it. Okay, so I have those there. I think we'll do another set. I am so hard on my pens these days. Work my way around. I'm going to do an aura on the inside because I went all the way up to my border, but I still want this aura. And you could go outside your border if you wanted to, or you could not border it. It's entirely up to you. Okay. So now I have to decide, how do I want to embellish this? Do I want to add little lines? Do I want little sketchy lines? Do I want to do something like add mist into this? Do I want my little stripes? Do I want to add any rounding? I like the look of these little lines and dashes and dots that I traditionally put into my flux. So I am going to add some rounding, because that adds kind of a little playful dance to it. Okay, so I'm going to take my pen and I'm just going to fatten basically the center of this lower line. So I'm just adding some thickness, but leaving the edges of these curves skinnier, you know, more delicate. And it's very subtle. So just basically I'm adding a little hat to my line. Put on a little hat. And then I color it in. Okay. So this one, I don't have quite as much space, so I'm actually going to do my rounding underneath. So I have that there. I could add rounding on these, but on this example here, instead of adding my rounding, I actually just went in and I did one line, but this time I'm just going to go in, and in my lower line I'm just going to use my graphic, and I'm just going to add a darker pen stroke. One of the things that I do as I add all of these things is I use the hollow bob method and make sure I don't draw over anything that's already there. Okay, so if I have a line that's already there, I don't want to draw anything over top of it because I want this to kind of look like it's behind. Okay. So there we go. So I have those in there like that. And now comes time for the detail work. So I want these little curvy little stems kind of add movement to your flux. So I kind of want that type of look. So I'm going to add a stroke coming up the center with just a little bit of a curve to it. And I'm not paying a ton of attention to which direction it's going in. I just want it to look like it has movement. And then I'm going to do little mini auras of those lines. And again, I am paying attention to not draw over anything that's already there. And as you can see, this looks a little busy, but once we add in our shading, it's going to look less so. And you could just draw little regular straight lines or stripes in here, whatever you like. Okay, but I like kind of these little wavy, wiggly lines that I have going on there. I can leave this open as negative space, but I think I'm going to again do those little wavy, wiggly kind of lines. So this is going to have a little bit of movement, a little bit of playfulness to it. I'm not really one for following the rules, but this is going to give it a very organic feel. Okay. And then I'm going to decide, how do I want to tie this all together? And I want to tie it together with my dots. So I'm going to take my graphic pen again, because it's going to give me bold little polka dots, and I'm going to add some polka dots in this in-between curve. Right? Again, you can detail this up with different little embellishments and quirks and really make it yours. And that's part of what makes it fun, is you have all these little different elements and pieces that you can add to in order to make it different every time you draw it. So I'm going to add these in here as well. And I said that these little polka dots were going to be what I used to unify my tile, to make everything kind of work together, right? So now I'm going to go into my flux, and I'm going to draw those little movement pen strokes with my skinnier pen, and then I'm going to come back with my graphic pen, and I'm going to add a little dot to each one. And you could do 2 or 3, whatever works for you. I'm going to do this on a couple, and then we'll shade. And then I'll move on and I'll do another tile for you. And I know I work fast. It's because I want to show you as many things as I possibly can. I go slower in my actual classes, but I leave these up for you, so you can rewind and watch as many times as you'd like, and I would rather go quickly and show you a bunch of things so that you have a bunch of different options and can learn, you know, a whole bunch of stuff when you can watch it over and over and over again. So if you're not keeping up, or you think I'm going really fast, just know that I'm not trying to rush you. I just want to show you as many things as I can. The entire purpose of these little mini demos that I started doing on Saturdays was because a friend of mine, another CZT, and I were talking about how we get stuck in a rut. You know, you draw the same pattern over and over and over, and you find yourself using, you know, the same couple of patterns, which is wonderful. It's one of the greatest things about Zentangle is if you only know a handful of patterns, you can still make art for the rest of your life, because you can always change them up and you can always do things differently. But at the same time, it is nice to change things up a little bit. And it is nice to not always draw the same patterns exactly the same way, because you want things to look different, right? Alright, so I have all my pen strokes in here. I'm going to come in with my pencil. I'm going to shade along the edges of my flux because I want that to pop out. I'm not shading all the way up because I really just want this center to pop up. And like I said, this part's a little busy, so by adding my shading, it's going to soften that. But you're still going to see the hints of it behind it. So it's going to change the look. Anybody have any questions about this tile? And I hope my whole goal of putting stuff like this in front of you is that it sparks your imagination and makes you start thinking, oh, I could do this pattern using shattuck as my crisscross bars, or I could do Rixty, which we did last week, and use that as my bars for my droop. Right? I love patterns inside patterns. It's one of my favorite things. It's like layering. A lot of you know that I'm also a watercolor artist, so layers are huge, right? And being able to layer your tangles by adding one into another is just super fun. So you can see how this looks a whole lot less busy than it did a few minutes ago. I now have a ton of graphite on this tortillon, so I'm not adding more graphite. I'm just taking what's on there and I'm softly blending along this curve, and it's gonna give it kind of like a little pillow effect and make it I don't know, kind of make it look squishy. Okay, we're gonna call that one done. And as you can see, I did the same thing, and once again they look completely different. You can tell they're the same pattern and I use the same kind of technique, but you get a completely different effect. So depending on the day you draw it, it's going to look a little different. We'll move on to this one. I'm going to take a sip of my tea. I'm going to take my pencil, make my dots, and my border. Okay, now for this one, I took my graphic pen and I made a boulder line going across, and I actually thickened that a little bit. And I tell people all the time, I've never drawn a straight line in my life, and if I need it to look straight, I thicken it. Okay, so now I'm going to add an aura to that line on either side. It's going to give me that racing stripe kind of look that I have going on there. It's okay if your pen wiggles. You can see mine did there. Some days are better for straighter lines than others. Today's not a straight line kind of day, apparently. I'm going to intersect that coming in from a different angle Again, I'm going to use the hollow bar method so that I don't go over what I've already drawn. I'm not being particularly mindful of which, where I come in, because it doesn't really matter exactly what points I bring these into my tile. I just want to intersect this in 3, or you could add 4 places. And I like curved lines, but you may like straighter lines. And that's perfectly okay. It's all about what you like and what your personal preferences are. I'm going to come in with my thin, and I'm using my thin pen to do these auras. But you could certainly use your thicker pen too if you wanted to. Or you could have drawn this with your thin pen. Okay. So that's fun and a little different than what we've already done. So now I'm going to kind of randomly add in some curved strokes. And they're not connected, and they're going in different shapes and different directions, but I'm putting them in each. Okay? I'm going to do another set. And these are just some curved strokes. So instead of them being necessarily, the C or the arc, these are just kind of random. I have a hard time with random. I like my stuff to match. I like it to line up. So I have to think about doing something like this. So for me, when I'm using tangling for mindfulness, when I'm using it to relax, I like to pick the patterns I have to think about. I like to do something like this that's a little out of my comfort zone, because then I have to really kind of think about what I'm doing. And that in itself forces me to look at my one stroke at a time. So now I'm doing an aura on each of these. And this is when I start to kind of make them line up a little bit, but not really. Like it's not going to match over here, but that's going to be part of my cool effect. All right, so I have that shape. Now I'm going to do this one. And obviously you could do them closer together and do 3 or 4, depending on how many you want. I'm doing 2 on this, mostly for time's sake. I know you may have other things to do today. Okay. And now I'm going to come in and I'm going to add rain. It's not actual rain, but it's like a variant of rain. So I'm going to make a little line and a couple dots. Another little line and some dots. And I'm going to fill these sections, these little segments, these little orange slices with this. And I like to kind of go in the middle first. And I'm going to vary, where I put the dots and how many dots I include. And I'm not, necessarily starbursting them out. I'm just kind of adding them in, so they don't all start in the same place. Starbursting is my own term. That's not an official Zentangle term. It's just one of those things that I make up in my head because it looks like sun rays or whatever. Okay, and if you, depending on how you draw these in, again, you're going to get different effects. So if you did make them curve out all from the same point, it's going to give you that starbursty kind of pattern. Look almost like a flower stamen. Okay, so I do that first row, and now I'll move on to my second. And again, I'm just varying these. Some have 1 dot, some have 2 or 3, some are really tall and have a lot of lines, some have very little line and a lot of dots. Okay. I'm not going to do the whole tile, but I'll do another segment or two, and then I'll show you how I shade this, because you can see how it ends up. And it's a lot of, I find this very peaceful to do, this mist, this pattern. I keep calling it rain, and I know it's not. Rain is a completely different pattern. But this mist pattern is one that I find to be very soothing to just kind of draw in when I'm looking for some quiet time for my brain. So then to shade it, I would shade primarily along these little curves. Right, so I add in some graphite there and there. I'm outside my border, but that's okay. Borders are really just there as a suggestion. And I like to make it darker close to that edge where I laid down my graphite. I don't like to go super far, like spread my graphite out super far when I draw this pattern this way. Okay. I just like it to kind of stay nice and dense near the edge. I'm going to come in right here as well. And I'm going to do the same thing, keeping it nice and dense near the edge, but then I'm going to lightly pull some of the graphite right along that ribbon. So I'm accenting it, but it's not my focus. Okay, so then I just drag it up. Okay, so that's how I did that. All right, I have one more I'm going to show you, and then we're going to wrap up for today. And this is super fun and a little different. Again, I'm going to put my border down, and I'm going to do this one really close to the edge because I tend to go outside my border for this one. I'm going to start by drawing a curved kind of line, and then I'm going to add a second line that comes into that first line, and then a third line that again gets narrower until it goes into or comes right next to that line. In this one, I had them next to each other. In this one, I kind of varied it. We're gonna play with different widths on the other ends. So this one, I brought them together. I'm gonna do another one coming from a different direction. So I'll come here. And again, the hollow bound method, making sure that I did not go over those lines. So here I'm going to bring this one in, and I'm making it narrower, but they're not going to actually touch. And the same with this one. I'm going to bring this in, but it's not going to touch. Okay, and then one more, and this one's going to come in. I hopscotched it over what I've already drawn. I'm going to bring this one in tight, and then I'm going to flare it back out. And you can play with these however you want to. Okay, so I have this tile divided up, but it's in kind of an abstracty kind of way. Now, I usually use a slightly bigger pen, but not necessarily my graphic for this. And this is a method I call broomsticking. And again, that's only my word. It's not anything that I've ever heard anywhere, but I always think of it like a broom. So I'm using a 5. You can do this with a 1. You could do it with your graphic. You know, it just takes a little bit longer with an 01. I'm going to cap my pens because I've been really bad about leaving those uncapped lately. So what I do is I pick a point that I want my thickness to go to. So maybe about here, and I make a tiny little dot. And then at the bottom here, I make these little sketchy strokes. Okay, so like the bottom of a broomstick. And then I curve that line up to about where I made my dot. And then I will just color this in with little sketchy strokes. Okay, I'm going to come on to this one. I want this one to come up to about here. Okay, and I want it to be about that wide. So I'm going to, again, I'm making these little sketchy strokes, and I'm holding my pen at an angle. So they're really kind of coming up at an angle, right? And then right around wherever, you know, feels most natural, I'm going to just kind of start to bring that in thinner until I can fade it into that line. Okay, and I'll do the same with this one. And this one's not going to go quite as high up, so maybe I want it this wide. I'm going to bring it up to there and fade that line in. And it's a little thick here, so I'll just make little sketchy strokes until it looks neater. Okay? I'm going to do the same technique with the wider strokes and that broomsticking technique on the edges of these. And this, you know, for this technique, I don't worry about coloring it in solid or dark. I want it to look kind of sketchy. Okay? And you don't have to go in from the same direction. So I came in and thickened on this side this time. And I'm going to bring that up just a little bit here. I'll bring this one just a little bit to thicken that. Okay, and then I'll do one more. And you could do both ends if you wanted to, but like this one, we brought these to a narrower point. But this one, it could be cool to do broomsticking on that edge too. And I use this in other types of sketching and drawing as well. Okay, so I have that in. I'm going to put my thicker pen away. I'm going to come in and I'm going to do some curves that I'm going to do my aura on, and then I'm going to do the opposite, so that they kind of make little X's. And this just gives it kind of a little funky, fun quirk. And they don't always have to make X's. You can vary them depending on how you want to. You could just do one. You could actually fit in these nice rounded curves that you've done on some of the others. You don't have to necessarily combine the, you know, this broomsticking technique with this X's technique. You can mix and match these. That's the beauty of Zentangle. Or you can mix it with anything that your mind comes up with, which is what I really want to see. So I like to go in, because I have these sketchy strokes, I like to go in and I like to add little line work, which is just a quick little lines to fill it in. So I just use little teeny tiny pen strokes. And that adds some texture, and it adds a little different value to the tone, right? So these are darker, this is your white, and then this is like a gray. And then you could come in and you can do other, like another row. I'm just gonna do 1 or 2 of these, and then we'll call it a day. I'll show you how I finish this off. I like to kind of leave some of these open, because this has this open feel to it. So where, like on this one, I didn't connect them. I think that adds to the abstract feel. And then I will go in with my pen and I will just make some little flick motions. So instead of a very specific, precise line, I'm adding something that once again has kind of a sketchy feel to it, which ties in with the other technique. So I hope these gave you some ideas of some different ways to maybe use droop, some things to think about. Hopefully it sparked your imagination in a way that it hadn't before, and that you play with this pattern a little more than maybe you were before. Because there's a lot of cool things, a lot of fun things that you can do that you might not have thought about. And that's really what this is all about, right? Is learning some fun ways to play with the tools that are already in our Tangle toolbox. And if you hadn't tried Drupe before, I hope you do. And if you had tried it before, I hope you try it in a new way. So everybody have a great weekend, and I hope to see you next Saturday. Let's see, what pattern am I doing next Saturday? I don't even remember off the top of my head. But I have another one for you, and it will be a good time. And there we go. There's my calendar. So it looks like I haven't even decided. So if you have any suggestions, any patterns you'd like to see me play with, then by all means leave me a message or a comment, and I will add it to my list of tangles that I demo and play with for you. I can't believe next Saturday is August already. My calendar's coming out this week with all of my classes. I have a couple gem classes that are already either filled up or mostly filled up, but everything else should still be open. And I will see everyone soon. Bye-bye. Have a nice day.